These are the solutions to your proportional relationship / direct variation practice worksheet. Number 1, the discount on gasoline purchases is proportional to the number of gallons purchased as shown in the graph. It tells us that it's proportional, which means it forms a straight line. It passes through the origin, and it can be written in the form y equals something times x. So in part A, it says interpret the point 15, 75 hundredths. Interpret means tell me what the point means. So right here we have the point, and that is for station B. And this tells us that 15 gallons of gas will have a discount of 75 cents. So I'm using the labels on the x and y axis to help me figure out what the point means. So I can say there is a 75-cent discount when you buy 15 gallons. Okay, so again, interpret just means tell me what it means. Okay, part B, create an equation that models the cost for station A. In order to do that, I need to find the slope of the line. I'm going to use this point and draw in a slope triangle. So rise over run. I know that it needs to be in this format where I do y equals slope times x. Back on the graph, this has a rise of 1. Now I know it went up 4 boxes, but we need to use the scale, so this actually went up 1. So I'm going to do slope is rise over run, and this went up 1, and it went over from 0 to 10. So rise over run would be 1/10. Because I'm talking about money, it might be helpful to write it as a decimal. It's okay if you just said 1/10 though. So now I have y equals 1/10 x. And in the context of the problem, the slope will represent the unit rate. I'm going to be really specific and say unit rate of 10 cents per gallon. Okay, part C, this time we need an equation for station B. So just like before, I can draw in a slope triangle and do rise over run. So this time we went up 75 cents and went over 15. So the slope would be 75 hundredths over 15. Now, it's not really proper form to have a decimal within a fraction if you can avoid it. So I'm going to divide 75 hundredths by 15. And when I do, I get 5 hundredths. So for the equation, I would have y equals 5 hundredths x. And this tells me that it would cost, or it would be a discount of 5 cents per gallon. So on part D, we could say station A offers the greater discount and we'll be really specific and say by 5 cents. So you're going to save an extra 5 cents per gallon if you go to station A. Okay, part F, what is the discount at station A? Should be a T there. If 15 gallons are purchased. So now we're going to follow this line until we get to 15. So we're looking at this point right here. That's going to be 15 comma, and then we're looking for that other number. So I'm going to follow this line all the way across, and I see that I would save $1.50. part G, for station A, what would be the ordered pair that represents the unit rate or the discount for 1 gallon? So remember, we have our unit rate is always going to be this point 1 comma R, where R represents the unit rate. So at station A, I'm looking at this point right here. Now off of the graph, it is a little bit hard to tell, but we already have the slope, and the slope is the same as the unit rate. So since the unit rate is 10 cents per 1 gallon, we could write the ordered pair as 1 comma 1 tenth. And have a 0 in there, you can. So that would be your ordered pair that represents the unit rate. Okay, number 2, graph the line y equals 5x. Now we know our slope-intercept form. If this is in y equals mx plus b form, then b is actually 0 and the slope is 5. So I could say slope equals 5, y-intercept equals 0. So we can graph that line. You can also set up a table or a chart and pick some x values and then figure out what y would be. So let's say I pick -1 for x. -1 times 5 is -5. Then I can pick 0. 0 times 5 is 0. And 1. 1 times 5 is 5. So all 3 of those points are going to be on my graph. So -1, -5. Put a dot. 0, 0. And then we can also count out up 5 over 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over 1. And now we can draw in the line. So connect those points as straight as we can and put arrows on the end to show that it continues in both directions. Okay, part A, is this a proportional relationship? The things we need to look for. Does it pass through the origin? And this one does. Is it a straight line? Which it is, we just drew a straight line. And does it have the form y equals slope times x? Which if we look at the equation, it does. So we have 3 different criteria that we are looking for. All of them pass, so that is a yes. Okay, part B, you are going to come up with any 3 scenarios that you would like that can be modeled using the line y equals 5x. So we could use something like a unit rate. Maybe it costs $5 for 1 cookie. We'll have to assume those are really high quality cookies at $5 a cookie. We could also have a speed of 5 miles per 1 hour. So maybe you're talking about how quickly you ride your bike to school or something like that. And maybe you also do something where you do 5 points per each problem. So this might be points that you're getting on a homework assignment or a quiz, something like that. So anything that has a unit rate that matches your slope would work for your scenario. All right, next up, we have 2 different companies. Ben is planning a trip and researched the prices. At Pertz, it is $25 for 1 day and $95 for 5 days. Renterprise charges $40 for 2 days and $80 for 4 days. So on the graph, we always want to have the origin and count out our scale from there. We always want to have time on the x-axis and money on the y-axis. So I'm going to label days and cost in money. That way I don't have to list the dollar sign each time. I'm going to pause for a moment while I put those labels in. Okay, now that I have the labels, I'm going to graph Pertz using green. So at Pertz, for day 1, I have over 1 up 25, so that's the first green dot on the graph. And then it is $95 for 5 days. So I'm going to go over to 5 and up to 95. Okay, again, I'm going to draw in a straight line, connecting the points, and then I'm going to extend it back all the way to the y-axis. trace that in green, put an arrow on the end, and that represents perks. Okay, you will notice that it does not cross at the point 0, 0. When I use a straight line or a ruler, it's actually a little bit above that, in between 0 and 10. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Okay, the next line is for Renterprise. I'll use blue for that. This one is $40 for 2 days. So at 2 days, I'll put $40 right there. And at 4 days, it is $80, just above the line. Okay, again, we will draw in the line. And this time, your line does cross through the origin. So you'll see that there's a point where they kind of flip-flop which one is the bigger amount. Okay, so part A we did. The other piece is we'll put a title for our graph. So we could say maybe something like Ben's Research or Car Company Prices, something like that. Okay, part B, what is the slope of each line? So for Hertz in green, we had the points. If we do rise over run, so this is where we really need to pay attention from the scale. Our rise, we went from 25 up to 95, so that would be a rise of 70. And for the run, we went from 1 day to 5 days, so that would be a run of 4. Now, whenever we can, we're going to simplify the fraction. I'm going to turn it into a decimal just because later on it represents your money. So the slope would be 17.5. Okay, Renterprise in blue, we're going from 40 up to 80, which is a rise of 40. And in the run, we're going from 2 to 4, so run of 2. So 40 halves would be a slope of 20. Okay, just like we saw before, the slope represents the unit rate. I'll actually say rates because there are 2 lines. Okay, now we're going to find the y-intercept. So for, this is in blue, for Hertz, it was $25 on day 1, and we had a slope of 1750. So if I do 25 minus 1750, that's going to tell me what the cost would be at 0 days. So when we subtract, we get 7.5. And looking at the graph, that actually fits, because we're looking right here at these points. So you've got a slope that's a little bit above where your origin is. Okay, then for Renterprise, this one, if it is $40 for 2 days, it would be $20 for 1 day. That would be our unit rate. And then if it's $20 for 1 day, that would actually be $0 for 0 days. Now, this one's a little bit tricky because the 7.5 y-intercept, that's going to represent your flat fee. So yes, I do realize that if you rent it for 0 days, it doesn't really make sense that you still have to pay $7.50. But they're charging that as maybe an upfront administrative fee or application fee or something like that. So when we get to part E, we would say that the company that does not charge an initial fee would be Renterprise. So Renterprise does not charge an initial fee. And I can tell for 2 reasons. Because the line passes through the origin. a proportional relationship. Two reasons on that one. Okay, so now that we have the slope and we have the y-intercept, Hertz has an equation of y equals 17.5x plus 7.5. And Renterprise has an equation of y equals 20x. Okay, part 2, use algebra to calculate the break-even point. Check your answer using the graph. So the break-even point, that is at how many days is the cost the same at both places. This is solving a system of equations, and we are going to use substitution since we are using algebra. So, right now, solve using a system of equations. And we already have our system up above, so now we just need to solve these equations right here. Okay, to do that, if y equals 17.5x plus 7.5 and y equals 20x, then I can just say that 17.5x plus 7.5 equals 20x. And now I have this equation to solve. Okay, to solve it, we're going to subtract 17.5x from each side. Here are your 0 pairs. And then we're going to divide by 2.5 on each side. So we get an answer of 3 equals x, and based on our graph, x is the number of days. So the break-even point would be 3 days. If we use either one of the equations, let's say we use Renterprise at $20 per day, your cost would be $60. So if you wrote this as an ordered pair, you would have the point 3 comma 60 in parentheses. If you wrote it in context of the problem, you could say it would cost $60 to rent the car for 3 days. It did want us to check it on the graph, so I'm going to go back to the graph. I know it's a little bit hard to tell because the lines are so close, but right here at 3 days, this is the point where they switch, and you can kind of see it. The blue line goes from being underneath the green one to being above it, and if we follow it across, we get 60 days. So here's the $60. So 3 days would cost $60. Okay, please make sure that you have fixed anything that you missed. Use this to study for your test. These are similar types of problems to what you will see.